Greetings, friends, and it is time for the last book review of 2022. Andromeda Strain by Michael Crichton. This is the first book I've ever read by Michael Crichton. You may know him from such films as Congo and Jurassic Park and The Andromeda Strain. And is that all the ones he's got movies about? Sphere? Is Sphere a movie? State of Fear? Sphere? State of Fear? Both of those? State of Fear, I think, is kind of similar to this, I think. I'm really wanting to read more of this, more of Michael Crichton now that he's going to be one of my favorite authors, I think. If I had to judge my favorite authors right now, George R. Martin would be probably at the top because the way he writes is just so good. And then I would probably have to say James S.A. Corey with The Expanse because they're so bread and butter, always good, always reliable. You know it's going to be good. Even though there's two guys. I think one of those guys actually wrote with George R. R. Martin. And then I would probably go Stephen King. But then, there's so many, authors I have books of, but I haven't read any of their stuff yet, so I can't really say. Michael Crichton, I'll throw him in there as fourth for sure. Maybe. I mean, I just read one book by him. Like Joe Hill. Joe Hill would be way up there because I really love Nosferatu, but it's only one book, so I gotta read more books. And when I do, I'm going to make a list of my favorite authors. I'm going to rate them all. But reading a sci-fi book, when I've been reading all this fantasy crap, it is so refreshing because there's no world-building, time-wasting describing what a room looks like or what a place looks like or how the magic systems work. Because usually it takes me 100 pages to get into a fantasy novel. I'm like, okay, now I understand what's going on. Now I'm in, I'm invested, and I'm engaged. This book, I read the first page. I'm like, what's going on? And then page 2, I'm like, oh, okay, I get it. I'm all in, motherfucker. Chapter 1, I'm like, oh, shit. I like this book. Chapter 2, I'm like, oh, my God, this is a 5 out of 5. I need to make a video about this right now. And then every chapter afterward, I'm like, I need to start making a video about this. This is amazing. So this is copyright 1969. So this is about the government finding they had satellites up in orbit. So you know how the ocean has been mostly unexplored and you don't know there's all these extremophiles that live at the bottom of the ocean. Makes sense that there would also be extremophiles that have gone like germs up into the upper atmosphere and they evolved up there and they can do a bunch of crazy stuff. So the government has these satellites going around called the scoops, and they're scooping up just atmosphere for 18 rotations of the Earth or orbits or whatever. And then they come back down. They have all these real nice filters that try to capture them in there and stuff. And this one had something wrong with it, and I think it got hit by a meteorite or something that they found out later. So I don't know if it's something that they found in the atmosphere or it's something like alien parasite that was on piece of a rock or something. Anyway, it crash lands outside a little town like Piedmont, Arizona. And this also makes you see how competent the government was, the U.S. government back in the 60s, and they had all these contingency plans and everything ran smoothly because nobody was out to just get paid and just corrupt and everything back then. Also, you got to realize the technology back then was dot matrix printers. Because there's a lot of schematics in here of they're readouts of papers that come out of printers. Really crude drawings of maps and diagrams and things that you would see in an old computer program from the 80s. Or even earlier than that. But the first 2 chapters, so it engages you like a movie. It starts out kind of similar to The Stand by Stephen King. There's this van that's tracking this satellite that's crashed, and it tells them what direction it is, and they drive so far, then they check again, and they're they adjust course, and they go 20 miles this way or whatever until they find it. They realize it's in this little town, and they start seeing all these dead bodies, the whole town, everybody's dead, laying around in the middle of the streets. So then there's this guy walking around in a white robe, like Jesus, and they're on this open radio frequency to base, and they're saying there's a guy in a white robe. He's coming right for us. And then they're dead. Or, yeah, they're gone. They're dead. So then it switches to like Operation Wildfire initiated. And they like call in these special scientists and doctors and things that have been pre-chosen for this Operation Wildfire. They have this whole lab set up in Nevada. It's like 5 levels deep. It gets progressively harder or like more stringent. What do you call it? Sanitation stuff when you like decontamination units, right? It gets more decontaminated at the bottom, and there's like all these like. It's ridiculous. You know those things where you like put your hand in the gloves in the box, and you can manipulate something that's in like a clean room environment? This is like that, but you go into it and you put your whole body in a suit, and you're like attached to a tail behind you. Like it's like you're in a tunnel with a suit at the end, so you can like go into the room yourself. And it's like crazy. Like it takes 24 hours to get down to level 5 because you have to go through each different steps of like they put you underwater. They spray shit on you. They like flash you with light, and they burn off a top layer of your skin. You have to like rest in between, and they do like tests on you, and they interview you and shit. And then, if something gets loose in this lab, they have a nuclear bomb that's ready to go off. And they tell this guy, he's one of the scientists. He's like the surgeon, and he's like the only one that's not married. And they call it the odd man hypothesis. And he's like, what's the big deal with like, what does it matter if I'm married or not? He's like, oh, well, it takes 2 keys to turn the thing for the nuke. And we had to have one guy that's not married because it's like a really important decision. You know, you can't be dependent on like if your wife, you have to worry about your wife and kids and stuff. He's like, oh, okay, but like, after he asked him something about like, if I had to turn the key and make a decision to blow up the base. And they're like, oh no, the base will just automatically explode. Your key is to stop the explosion from happening. It's going to explode in like 3 minutes from when the fucking thing gets out. You're just got to save us from all dying. He's like, oh, okay. I was like, holy shit. So they call in this bug squad. And one of the guys is like a super genius. All the characters are really good. One of them has like epilepsy. But the main character, I guess he's like the smart one. They say he knows everything, and he's fascinated by everything else. So, like, he's like a genius in a lot of different ways. And then they bring 2 of them in with suits, you know, on a helicopter. And the helicopter pilot, they're lowering him into the town to, like, check it out. And they're talking about, like, how much the helicopter pilot's getting paid that night because he's getting, like, overtime and hazard pay and all these different kinds of extra pay because it's so dangerous. And then it's like $1,000 because back in the 70s it was a lot of money, I guess. They're talking about one of these clean rooms. It's like, oh, it's $100,000 clean room. It was pretty expensive. I'm like, it's like less than my house. But like, they ask him like, do you know what to do? Like if something goes wrong, he's like, yeah, I just go back to base. And they explain like, if he doesn't go back to base, his helicopter will be shot down or explode or something like that. And the reason he goes back to base is that he hovers above the helipad long enough for them to figure out a way to burn his helicopter and him to death before the virus gets loose. They're so fucking prepared for the worst possible scenario. It's dope. And then they see like these buzzards eating everybody, and they're like, they start dropping like chloroform gas on them or some kind of chloroform gas to kill the birds, because the birds get the virus and they fly away, they can spread it. And then they find these suicide victims, and like there's flies on one of them, and the guy makes a mental note of it, but they never like bring it up again, which is kind of interesting. They kind of leave a lot of room for like the Andromeda strain evolution, which is like right here. So that's the sequel. But I'm sure it was written like many years later, probably. So I don't know if they'd have the same opinion of the government as they did back in then. So 2 of these suicides are really weird because one of them is a little kid who had like model airplanes and trains and stuff, and he like took some of the modeling glue and he just poured it into his mouth and it hardened. like he was trying to drink it. Another guy drowned himself in his bathtub, but he wasn't like... You can't really drown yourself. It's like one of the hardest ways to commit suicide. He just put his head underwater and just held it there until he drowned. Like, I figured he was trying to drink or breathe the water, and he drowned himself because maybe the virus makes people think the kid was trying to drink the glue and he was trying to drink the water or breathe the water or something. Turned out I was just wrong. I don't think they even explained that. One of them was like hanging herself. One of them, a guy blew his head off. There was a cop that said something about... What was it he said? He said something like a weird thing and then he shot himself. He killed like 6 people and then he blew his head off. So yeah, that's like the main beginning of the book. And I'm going to tell you the rest of it, but... It kind of ended abruptly. The virus just kind of mutated and it started like deteriorating rubber. So this plane flew through the area above and like the pilot's mask and stuff, and the plane it just all deteriorated, and I think he crashed because of that somehow. And then I think it mutated again and it was kind of harmless. So like it mutated the seals inside of the wildfire lab and it set off the nuke. I'm not going to tell you any more than that, but it's like, it just ended up being harmless at the end. Or was it? And then that's why the sequel will probably pick up from where it wasn't really as harmless as they thought. But, oh my god, this was a wild ride. The book just keeps you engaged the whole time. If you probably need like a little bit of knowledge of biology and chemistry, because they're talking about some really technical things. They're doing all these scientific tests on like rhesus monkeys and rats. Like they got one rat and they put him in the air and they knew it was airborne because the rat died instantly. They take that dead rat and they put him next to a live rat and then they opened with a filter in between and the rat was fine. So then they replaced the filter with a larger gauge filter over and over again until they got to the right size. And like, okay, now we know the virus is like about 1 micron in diameter, so they know how big it is. They have like crazy microscopes and electron microscopes, and they're zooming in on this satellite and the little piece of rock that came off of it, and it's like got this green stuff on it, and they're watching it like replicate, and it has like a hexagonal shape. And the monkeys, like what it does is it makes your blood clot like everywhere in all your veins and arteries at the same time. They don't understand how that could do that because there's like 13 steps for blood clotting to occur, and it just happened in like 3 seconds. It kills you in like 3 seconds. So, yeah, pretty fucking scary. And a lot of this, the thing about like viruses being up in the atmosphere, it seems plausible. Like this could be true. So it's like a lot of this is kind of based on stuff that could happen. So. Oh, what was the other thing they mentioned that was like really scary about? It was like a real fact. Like the viruses in your gut, right? You have all these bacteria in your gut, and it protects you from all of these different diseases. And they had this like fake drug that was developed by Jensen Laboratories in the book. I forgot what it was called, but it kills all the bacteria in your body at once. So it can like cure cancer pretty much, but then like 6 days later or 6 weeks later or whatever, everybody just died because they had no gut bacteria protecting them from all these other viruses, and they all died from like new shit nobody had ever even heard of because we just been protecting ourselves from it by having all this bacteria in our gut. And once you got rid of that, it was like one guy like bloated up and popped like a balloon, I think, and another guy had a bunch of crazy shit happen. But it's like, this was probably before they had fecal implants. Remember that thing? Like you can take somebody's poop, take it out of there and put it in somebody else's butt, and it replaces your gut flora. Like that's a real medical thing they can do now. But like I probably didn't have it back in 1969. And I don't know. I think I'd rather just die. I don't want somebody else's poop going in my butt. That's just gross. But, oh shit, Michael Crichton. I put this under the mystery horror thriller category and not the sci-fi category because it's not really like space futuristic sci-fi like my other sci-fi stuff. And he writes like Jurassic Park and Congo and all these other kind of stories that are more thriller, adventure, suspense. I don't know what you would call it. But yeah, fucking great. I definitely want to read more Michael Crichton now.